So dedicated to the application of psychology and behaviour science for the effective online employee training for cybersecurity. Mark Brown, founder and CEO of Pysbersafe, sorry, I get my words out. Pysbersafe has joined us today to share their journey in the ever-changing digital landscape. Mark, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Well, firstly, thank you for taking the time to join us today and share your story. Would it be okay if we started off with you just sharing us a little bit about what you do and the sort of services that you offer, what it is you actually offer?
Sure. As you mentioned, our focus is very much behavior science and psychology. And in the main, we apply that to cybersecurity training. So we developed an online platform that uses the principles of behavioral science and the models that have been developed in that area to actually help people change their behaviors online. A lot of training is giving you information, do this, do that, and we somehow expect something to change, and of course that doesn't work. And when we saw that, we realized that clearly we can do this a lot better by applying research that focuses on changing people's behavior. And so we ended up building Pysbersafe because we couldn't find training that actually worked.
Okay. So in terms of how long Pysbersafe has been running for, how long has the business been going for now?
Pysbersafe itself, I set up in 2019, just before the pandemic,
right,
which was a double-edged sword. But it had its birth when I was working in an innovation hub for a large European bank, and where clients came to the bank say, "Hey, help! We need help with cybersecurity. You're a bank; you probably know what you're doing." So that gave us the opportunity in that innovation bubble to experiment and test and research and see what was going on out there in the world of cybersecurity training, and what clients were looking for, and what worked and what didn't. So we spent probably 3 years developing and building there, sold it to the bank's clients. The bank in the end decided that this is not something that they were a bank. So I left in 2019 and rebuilt it into Pysbersafe.
So you were sort of in the space prior to launching the company, having a good opportunity to sort of test and measure what works, what doesn't work, and then launch the business in 2019, right before the pandemic. What sort of challenges did that bring about for you?
Well, initially, to be honest, it was great because
or opportunities, I guess, yeah.
The whole world was slowed down. I could, fiddle and build and test and so on and so forth. And then after a while, I think, oh, well, I should actually start selling this stuff. Now, we were fortunate because our first client was another large European bank who we'd been talking to before. And they came along and said, "Hey, are you still doing this stuff?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely, here it is." And so they came on board. And that was great because we love to learn from our clients. So that helped us in terms of further development. The sad thing was, during that period, the second lockdown, I got COVID really rather badly.
Okay.
I ended up in hospital for 6 weeks. So that sort of stopped everything for 3 months. But hey, here we are. And firing.
So you started off on your own. Have you got a team now? What's the business look like now?
No, we started off pretty soon, of course, pre-pandemic or during the pandemic. So everybody's remote. So we have 3 full-time, 1 part-time. We have a lot of contractors, a number of contractors, in part because we don't need full-time developers on site all the time.
Yeah.
For example. And also because, during the pandemic, everything was remote. So we started off where people all over England. And no real need to suddenly insist that everybody commutes for 2 hours. So we meet every now and then.
Okay.
And that works.
Very good. And just thinking back to when you started back in 2019, then, if you had the opportunity to wind the clock back and start again, would you do anything differently?
That's a good question. I'd focus more on marketing.
Okay.
I think. I'd probably invest more upfront. What we're trying to do to a large extent is avoid, in some extent, the distraction of external financing, because it requires a whole other level of effort and managing stakeholders and shareholders and Lord knows
Yeah.
what, which, you know, so I've avoided it to some extent, but that necessarily does slow down the amount of additional development you do, because you don't suddenly sit on a pot of money. Having said that, we do learn a lot and we do iterate, very agile. So as we see something or a client feeds back something, or especially learners, when they say, hey, but I'm not like that, then we can incorporate that fairly quickly. So, we're constantly building and changing and developing
Yeah.
to improve. And of course, the cybersecurity market per se doesn't stop. So as something new happens, we can incorporate it pretty quickly to keep everything current and up to date, which is important, because we want to be close to the learner ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, it's never changing landscape. And there's a saying I've latched onto, which today is the slowest day of change for the rest of your life. And I'm sure in the cybersecurity world, that's ever more true.
Yeah, it is interesting though, because the types of cyber attacks change technically.
Okay.
A lot of the fundamentals stay the same. We're talking about the typical employee that we're trying to train and keep aware and change those little things that we do every day just to be that little bit safer. And so a lot of that fundamentally doesn't change. Phishing is still the most used attack method, if you like.
Yeah.
Passwords and credentials are still the most common target. And the way that hackers do that is still similar channels. The technology changes. So we're talking a lot about AI.
Yeah.
So that means that the phishing attacks are a little bit more sophisticated and a little bit more frequent, because it's a lot easier and quicker to create these things, for example.
Okay.
But the channels are still pretty much the same.
So some of those basic human mistakes are still the same human mistakes, just the technology has moved on a little bit with some of the methods that the hackers are using.
Yeah, that's it. And that's also why we focus on what we focus. I mean, ultimately, there are humans on the other side.
Yeah.
Yes, you can breach firewalls, et cetera, and there are great technological solutions for that. But ultimately, humans, people, you and me, are still the biggest target.
Yeah.
And the way that hackers or social engineers, if you want to call them, try and get in is through tried and tested techniques that we see actually come a lot out of behavioral science and research around, you name it, obesity, alcoholism, exercising, eating well, et cetera, or things like curiosity. That piques my interest. What's that? Click.
Yeah, human
so there are all
interest.
those almost standard behaviors that we fall for because we're human.
Yeah.
And as humans, we react to certain scenarios in a typical way. And unfortunately, hackers and cyber criminals know this.
Yeah.
So what we try and do is make sure that you know it, so that you can actually defend against it.
Interesting. Now go back to the business side of things. You sort of said earlier on about being avid learners and learning on the job and things. So what would you say are your biggest learnings as a business owner since you began in terms of business?
That there's a lot of admin.
A lot of admin.
Which gets in the way. Of course, it doesn't get in the way. It's got to be done. The more you can park that and automate that and offload it, the better.
Yeah.
So finding ways to pay your bills, get an accountant to sort out your financials, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't have to be overly expensive, but it's hours and hours of time that otherwise you've got to spend on tax returns, on VAT returns, what have you, that get in the way of building a business, really. That's one thing. The other is, I think, train other people up to know what you know.
Okay.
Or rather, get people in there that know what you don't know. I mean, it's a classic. We talk about it in sort of management terms, if you like, that, hire people to complement you. There will always be people who do certain things better than you do. find them, hire them. I am a certain type, and people around me are different types because, I mean, I have one lady who works with us, a colleague. She's great. She's very methodical and detail oriented, at least in terms of making sure that everything is documented, that clients are set up correctly, all that sort of detail, which is great because we need that double check and that certainty and that attention to detail on arguably the operational sides of the business.
Yeah.
That's not me. So I rely on others an awful lot, people who know more about the intricacies of the system than I do now, which is good.
There's a couple of really good lessons in there. So like you say, the sort of the admin side of it is recognizing quite quickly you can get quite caught up in the admin, whereas that's sometimes it's an easy thing to delegate or get somebody else in to do that, so you can spend your time working on growing the business rather than administering it. Really valuable that. And I think the training the other people is recognizing what your strengths are, recognizing, being aware of where you fit in the organization, and then bringing other people in that you can train up, but also recognizing that different characters of people complement different job roles.
Yeah.
Sometimes
the other thing I'd say is, and this is a nice little term, remember to work on the business and not in the business.
Yeah, it's an all too common thing where business owners end up buying a job or creating a job, don't they? They own the job that they have in the business that they've got rather than owning a business. There's a subtle difference.
Exactly.
Yeah, very true.
And to me, the psychology and shaping episodes so that they really work on the psychological points or triggers that we want. To me, that's fascinating, but that's in the business. And ultimately, the business has got to grow, and you've got to market, and you've got to sell, and so on and so forth, which can be tough. And so you've got to be careful that you don't just not do that or put it off, because it's far easier to create that little thing. Hey, that's cool. Look at that. They're going to love this.
Yeah.
It's important, but you've got to run a business.
Yeah. Invaluable. So thinking about the team members then, so as you're growing and you're looking at bringing team members on, what sort of qualities are you looking for within your team? And then how do you foster a really productive working environment once they're in your team?
Oh, we hire on attitude.
Okay.
None of this is rocket science. And for certain things, you will need certain skills. It might be you need to know HTML or whatever it may be. Fine. But within that, it's all about attitude. Yes, I want to do this. I want to do it properly. I want to do the best that I can. And then we try and reward that, not through massive bonuses and stuff. Hey, we're a small company. But through other ways of making sure that what we're doing is interesting. Making sure that if I'm learning something new about something particular around, I don't know, persuasion techniques, for example, that's shared, that other people learn that for the rest of their life. It's not all, can't all be work, but for me, sometimes it feels like it's all work.
Okay.
But a lot of stuff which is fascinating, you can apply pretty much anywhere and everywhere. We're talking about behavior, we're talking about behavior change. There are an awful lot of good academics who've written good books that are approachable, that, of course, we share with everybody and anybody. We also try and put that in the blogs and the newsletters that we put out. We link a lot of it to, hey, here's something that you could use elsewhere in your life. So we want to make it we're a learning environment, to put it tritely.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of value in that, in terms of going back to the Maslow hierarchy of need, giving people a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, creating that environment where they feel like they're part of something, not, like you say, not just a job for a pay packet. It's they're benefiting and growing within the organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really cool. And in terms of you sort of mentioned about that sometimes it feels like the business is always on the go, and one of the big fears a lot of people have before they go into business, that it seems like it's too much work. So it's, I don't have the time, or it's too much work for me to start doing that. And, business can take a lot of our time. It's sort of in your mind a lot of the time. It's not necessarily a 9-to-5 thing. How do you balance your personal time with the demands of running a business?
I'm not sure I do very well, to be honest. I make sure I get out. I spend a lot of time in the gym. Well, a lot of time, no. I'm in the gym 4 or 5 times a week. I walk the dog every day just to get out and sort of, de-stress.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, well, we have family, etc. But no, I spend a lot of time on this, but I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not always a hardship, and oh God, I've got to go to work. I find the topics, the research fascinating. So I read a lot of books around it, a lot of podcasts, etc., etc. There's a lot out there that we can use and assimilate, and sometimes it's just complete downtime. So this last weekend, did nothing. But my body tells me, okay, hold on, your brain's full, you got to stop.
So again, a bit of awareness, listening to what your body's telling you, and then making sure that you spend the time then to get a break from it. But at the same time, if it interests you and it's something you're passionate about, it's kind of doesn't have to be a 9 to 5 type sort of arrangement. I kind of use the language these days around work-life integration. It's not necessarily sometimes 9 to 5 work and then home for the weekends. It's like integrating it in part of your everyday life, but being present in the mode that you're in, whether it's family time, whether it's business time, whether it's R&R time for yourself, is be present with yourself at that point.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's it.
Very good. And where do you see it? It sounds like an exciting business that's on a bit of a growth trajectory and lots of opportunity ahead of it. Where do you see the business and yourself in say the next 5 years' time, and what advice would you have for other business owners that are looking to grow over the next few years?
Well, keep an eye out. I think be ready for the opportunities. So we're working on right now, white labeling out in Asia and white labeling with a sort of Euro-American firm. What we're trying to do is make sure that this is scalable. So that ultimately, because it is a software as a service type platform, a lot of that will and does, to some extent at least, run itself. I mean, we're always there for the client, but as people go through episodes, those episodes serve themselves up to the learners, the employees, and people can go through them. So what we're looking for is to continue to add clients and add learners. That actually feeds us more information, which means we can learn more from that. And that in itself should make us even more effective.
Okay.
What we're finding is that actually our core competency is around the application of behavioral science. So we're starting to do a bit of work talking about influence, persuasion, behavioral science away from security. Like, look, you can use this here. If you've got a tricky situation or a tough client you're trying to get through to, there are ways you can make that easier for yourself by applying these lessons around behavioral science, psychology, social psychology. Okay. So we do a bit of consulting around there as well, which is, again, fascinating.
Yes. Yeah. Behavioral science and things, personalities is fascinating stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really good. Really good. Really good to hear that. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think is something you'd want to share with the listeners around, your business journey, or what to look for if they're in a sort of similar situation?
Stay positive. Sometimes it feels that, this is all too tough. This is all too tough. And, we tend to, as humans, we naturally focus on the negative. It's an evolutionary psychology thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you've got to actually recognize that. Again, be aware of your thinking, put it aside and look to what is positive. Certainly beginnings of running a small business, it can seem completely overwhelming.
Yeah.
But make sure that you see the positive, celebrate every single little win, frankly, and recognize that you're making progress. Look at where you were, look at where you've come to, and you've probably done a lot better than you're giving yourself benefit for. We tend to be our own worst critics.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Great advice. Great advice. Sometimes it's the quickest way to move forward is to stop and reflect and celebrate those wins, and like you say, keep a positive mindset. Really useful. Not as easy. It's easier said than done sometimes. Granted,
It is
but
easier said than done, but that's why, look back and say, hey, where was
yeah,
I? So for us, for example,
yeah,
where are we? More or less 4 years ago, there was nothing,
yeah,
so that's pretty good. And sometimes we forget that.
yeah. It's a great achievement.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The other thing I'd say is don't neglect your cybersecurity. Be fairly basic, and this is a thing, we have a European government as a client focusing on their SMEs,
Yeah,
largely because the SME as a sector as a whole, A, is most vulnerable, B, doesn't focus on cybersecurity because they think it's expensive, they don't know how, they don't have the in-house capability, etc., etc. Doesn't have to cost a lot of time or effort or money. It's a simple thing to safeguard yourself. And the problem is, certainly in the SME world, if you don't and you do get hacked, and I don't know, the percentages are horrible, you're toast.
yeah, yeah.
So look after your business.
Really good point. And where would our listeners be able to go to sort of get in touch with you guys in terms of the services that you offer, or reach out and just find out a little bit more about what you do?
Oh, yes. Well, see it. Oh no, you can see it up there. Cybersafe.com. Easy enough. We're there. We're online. You can find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, cybersafe.com. It'll come up. Google us.
Google.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All
Mark,
right.
thank you ever so much for your time today. It's a really interesting story. And again, appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
David, thanks very much. Good to see you.
Pleasure.